All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I just want to welcome everybody who's here and everybody who's joining shortly. We definitely have a few more registrants who haven't shown up yet, so I'm hoping we see a few more people. But thank you all for taking time to be here tonight. We're very excited to have you at our second public workshop for the Greater Lowell Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. We're excited to have you here with us tonight because we're working on building a safer and more connected walking and biking network for the region. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a brief overview of the project and the purpose of tonight's meeting. Toole is going to give that presentation, and then they'll share how they use a combination of data analysis as well as the engagement that we did all throughout the course of the summer to arrive at a draft regional vision. And that's going to be walking through this preliminary recommendations, key municipal connections, and the steps ahead in refining that network. And after that, we're going to go into interactive small breakout groups for a hands-on review of the maps. And this will be your chance to really help us to identify those priorities that are really important to you locally, important connections, and missing links that could shape the next phase of the plan. So we are going to come together after that to kind of share some of the highlights. And then we'll close by outlining the product timeline, explaining how your feedback tonight is going to be incorporated, and sharing how you can stay engaged and submit additional comments after the workshop. So again, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight and lending your voice to this regional effort. Your insights are really essential as we move forward on this plan. So I think with that, we are ready to get started. I know Katrina or Perry, if you want to share your screen.
I don't see the other people. I've got only you four and myself.
Yeah, I think other people seem to have their cameras off. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good. Okay.
How's that? Are you able to see the full screen slideshow?
Perfect. Great, thank you. So great. So I just kind of walked through what we're going to be doing tonight, provided a welcome and introductions. And I think on the next slide, I can share just a little bit about who we are. My name is Kelly Lightema. I'm the Deputy Director at the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. I'm here tonight with Jennifer Raitt, our Executive Director, Emmanuel Regatha, who's Transportation Planner 2, and Apple Gold Schultz, who is a Transportation Planner 1. We are staff of NMCOG, which is a regional planning agency that works within 9 communities on the map you see here: Lowell, Dracut, Tewksbury, Billerica, Chelmsford, Westford, Tingsboro, Dunstable, and Pepperell. We are governed by a policy board that has representatives from each of these 9 communities, and they really direct our work. We provide them with our work plans, they direct our work, and we also accept requests for projects from each of our member communities. So we do work on behalf of our individual communities, but we also do work at a regional level, like what we're doing with this plan. We additionally serve as staff to the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Northern Middlesex County, and that is the organization that passes through federal funding for highway and roadway improvements. And that is really important to this plan because what we are trying to do with this plan is identify ways that we can actually work with the MPO to funnel that funding to make sure that we're increasing the connections for pedestrians and cyclists across our region. Overall, our purpose is really to increase municipal capacity and then foster that regional collaboration and coordination. Like I said, also providing direct services to our communities. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Toole and really look forward to hearing you talk about how you got to the network.
Thanks for that intro. So if you were with us in July for our first public meeting, some of these first few slides may be a repeat, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So what are we developing? Well, the Toole consultant team, myself and my colleague Perry, have worked with Kelly and her team to review past plans and policies from across the region that relate to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and policy. We've looked at the base map of what exists in the region today for bicycling and walking, and we're working towards a toolbox of treatments and changes that feed into a regional network of pathways for people to walk and bike on. This is our latest kind of schedule. You probably may have seen this at the previous public meeting. It's been adapted as we've had to, roll with it as we go. But we're kind of in the middle to later stages of the project. We've done a lot of that initial groundwork, and we're coming to you in task 4 with the network identification to get a really great map. And then we'll go from there into how to make that map a reality. So setting the foundation here. Step 1, like I said, is what's existing. So we get these maps based on the data we have from Mass DOT and from these municipalities. So you have one map showing the existing bicycle infrastructure. The backbone of this network are some of the rail trails in the region. So we have the Bruce Freeman down in Westford and Chelmsford, terminating in Lowell, and then, of course, connecting even further south. And then over in Pepperell and Dunstable, we have the Nashua River Rail Trail. So those are in green. We call those shared use paths, but AKA rail trail. And then we have some other bicycle lanes across the region as well. For people walking, this is our sidewalk network. We take the shared use paths and put them on this map too, because in a rail trail, that's for people walking or bicycling, and then the sidewalk network. So like I said, this data comes from what Mass DOT and or the municipalities themselves have been collected. I can guarantee you neither of these data sources are perfect. So if you do see, hey, I don't know, I'm not sure if that exact sidewalk exists, or hey, I think that sidewalk goes a little further. We would welcome any comments like that, because no data source can be perfect. So the other core element of our foundation here is the vision and goals for the region. So in our first phase of the public meeting in July and working with this team plus our dedicated advisory committee, we came up with a vision statement and 6 goals that really declare what we want for the region once this plan becomes implemented. So we want a northern Middlesex region that is cohesive, where people walking, rolling, bicycling, wheeling, and taking transit. We add that one in there too, because to get to the bus, you usually have to walk, sometimes bike if you're very brave. And we want that to be safe and comfortable across all 9 municipalities. We want active transportation to be used both for travel to destinations such as school, work, errands, and for recreation. So giving more people that choice. And so that's going to become important, because it's the themes within there that will inform how we do our analysis that I'll start talking you through. So doing our analysis, developing the draft walking and bicycling network. This is an overview of that process. So all the way on this green box on the left-hand side where it says analysis inputs, that's where we took the themes from the vision statement and translated them into things that we could put on a map. So for equity, we have a map for that, comfort, safety, access, and I'll walk you through all of those maps. Then we put our lines on a map. We synthesize that and come with a draft network. And that draft network is intended to answer the question, if we were to achieve our vision statement, what would we need? We want to generate a map that has all the connections that could make that vision statement a reality. So we reviewed that with the advisory committee, and now we're sharing it with you tonight. So getting into it, the first element in that analysis box was equity. So I'm going to share 2 maps that show how we measure that. The first one is 0 vehicle households. Well, driving is the most common mode of transportation across the region, and that only makes sense given how the transportation and land use is today. There are a number of households, in fact, 7% of households across the region that don't have any vehicles. We call these zero vehicle or zero car households. And 7% is a small percent, but that's 800 households and all the people in them. So we want to be mindful of where there's a higher concentration of those households. For those of you who logged on slightly early, you may have heard us talking with Doug about what we call the REJ Plus Index. This is something that the state puts out. Mass DOT analyzes this, and it is a index of different criteria that are commonly associated with higher transportation needs. So it includes people with disabilities, people with lower income, limited English proficiency, non-white groups, senior populations, and then, as I show on the previous slide, zero vehicle households. So Mass DOT does their algorithm and then highlights these zones where there's a higher propensity compared to other locations within the region. So Chelmsford is only being compared to the other towns in the NMCOG region, not to the whole state. So this is a really great index that shows us where there might be more transportation need. We're also looking at safety. One of the most important things that the transportation network can do is get us to our destination free of harm. And so NMCOG, the region recently completed the Greater Lowell Vision Zero plan. If you haven't checked that out, I definitely recommend it. That is a purely traffic safety look at transportation. And so we're coming on the back of that plan, and we want to use the data that was compiled for that to inform what we're doing here. So what you're seeing on the screen is what we call vulnerable road user VRU injury crashes. So I'll break that down. A vulnerable road user, that's a term that we use for somebody walking, bicycling, or otherwise traveling in a wheelchair, on a skateboard, you name it, in a way where they're not protected by a vehicle. So our vehicles today, well, sometimes they're pretty dangerous car crashes. It can be a good protective shell around you. Whereas if you're walking or bicycling, we classify that in the state of Massachusetts as a legal definition, as well as just a term of art, as a vulnerable road user. So we want to take a particular look for this study at those crashes. So that's what this map shows. Many of these crashes are located in Lowell, where there's a higher density of people traveling on those modes, as well as some key big roads, the big corridors that connect our towns and our cities. The Greater Lowell Vision Zero plan looks specifically at the pedestrian crashes that are more severe. So, we're not looking at a minor injury in this map, we're looking at a fatal or serious injury. So this is something we want to be especially mindful of, planning for the future. We want to put our solutions in our network in places where we can solve these problems and make them more safer. Similar map with those fatal and severe injury bicycle crashes. And then the final map I'll show in this safety series is what we call the high injury network. This is the network of streets developed as part of the Greater Lowell Vision Zero plan that have the highest concentration of the most severe crashes. And so what we did for this plan was we took that existing high injury network and we filtered it down even one more level to just those high injury locations that were near a vulnerable road user crash. So these locations are of particular focus for this study to improve. Next, we have comfort. That was another element of the vision statement. And so there's an industry standard way that we measure this for people bicycling. It's what we call level of traffic stress. This is a kind of mathy way that we try to capture what we all feel, which is that I would be more comfortable riding my bicycle on my neighborhood street than I would on the big roads with the faster cars. And so this index will pull in posted speed limit, an estimate of vehicle traffic, number of lanes, and whether or not there's a yellow line in the middle. And it aims to highlight streets where this most common type of bicyclist, what we call the interested but concerned folks, would bicycle. So we know that there are some folks who will really go for it no matter what the speed limit is, but there are some folks who are more mindful of only bicycling if they feel safe. And of course, that makes complete sense. This index is designed to highlight where that's not possible for the interested and concerned folks to bicycle. And so when we apply that to the region, we get a color-coded map that looks like this. Many of the neighborhood streets, low stress. There might not be bike lanes, but hey, it's slower, it's smaller. I would feel comfortable out there. I would feel comfortable out there with young children even, perhaps. The larger roads, they're red. So again, like with safety, we want to focus on improving that and finding locations on our network where that can be made safer. All right. Another element is we want folks to have access to destinations. Yes, to bicycling and walking for recreation, but can we also make it useful for those folks or some other people? So we have this big map of destinations of all sorts: schools, civic spaces, health centers, grocery stores, transit stops. And then what we did, especially to look at walking, was we took a quarter-mile called Walkshed and highlighted the roads around those destinations. So that's probably a priority area for us to improve, particularly the walking connections. Finally, we took in the input from the community. In our phase 1 of public engagement, we had that July public meeting. The NMCOG staff also hosted a series of pop-ups throughout the region, and we had an online survey. So these are 2 key maps that also help orient us around where we need connections and improvement. A few other things we looked at, but they're a little bit less tied directly into the vision statements. I'm not going to spend as much time on these. And I'm going to jump into the draft networks. So when we're thinking about people walking and bicycling, and planning for these future walking and bicycling networks for the region, we're thinking in 2 categories here. So for people bicycling, we can start to think about one regional network. You may bike between the towns, and you would likely go on longer trips bicycling. So for the bicycle network, we're going to be looking at one map of the whole region. For the walking network, walking is more local. Trips are shorter, so we have one map per municipality that we're going to be looking at for that. So here's what it looks like for bicycling. We've added these olive green arrows on top of the base map to show where this plan proposes new bicycling connections. You'll notice that in the background, we have the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, the Nashua River Rail Trail, because we're building on top of those connections that already exist. In the background, we have also a number of these dashed lines. An example is this Main Street line here in Tewksbury, but they're kind of all over the map. Those are other not yet constructed bicycle connections that previous planning efforts have identified and really uplifted. So we're imagining that those will become part of this recommended future network. They're just in a different color because they've already advanced a little bit. And we're working with the municipalities to kind of confirm the status of some of those dashed lines. So I've told you that this is based on all of the previous maps and analysis that we looked at, but this is me proving it to you. So for each of these corridors and the numbers here tied to the numbers on the previous slide, we compared them to the REJ Plus layer for equity. We compared 2 high BLTS, bike level of traffic stress scoring segments. We compared them to proximity to destinations, whether they are on the high injury network, and whether there were community input points on these corridors. And so what you're seeing is a lot of yeses. This shows us that all of them are near community engagement points. All of the corridors touch one of these REJ plus layers, and then many of them meet the other criteria as well. Switching over to the walking side, I'm showing you guys here a kind of big collage for each town rather than zooming in on each one specifically, because we'll have time to do that in the breakout groups. But just by way of orientation, for each municipality, we took a look at one or two core areas where there's lots of destinations close together, and we placed a red blob on those to say that that should be a continuous network. We should have no gaps in the sidewalk network inside of those bubbles. And then outside of those bubbles or blobs, we have a few other arrows where key connections could fill in gaps or bridge the gap to a key destination. So that is what we have for your input. We are here today presenting the draft walk bike network, but what comes next? So after this, we're going to really look more into the specifics about what type of treatment makes sense for these different connections. And then we're going to prioritize those treatments. I do want to emphasize this because that also means we don't have those answers yet. We don't yet have the answers of what a certain bike lane would look like. We do want to be prioritizing low stress solutions. So, giving people a lot of space, and where we can, giving them separation from vehicle traffic if they're on a bicycle. And so that means in future phases, we're going to look at, does that fit? Do we need to consider a parallel route? I'm underscoring this so you guys know we haven't got those answers yet. That's what will come in the future once we confirm with you all that the connections look right. So we're going to transition into the interactive part where we do breakout rooms. Key questions that you guys are invited to consider include, what do you think of the draft networks? From there, are there any that are a priority? Or are there any that we are missing and that you'd like to see a new connection added? So I'll pause here, and then I'm going to show kind of a demo of how we're going to interact during the breakout group session. While I shift my screen share, Kelly, anything to add at this stage?
No, I think just the main thing to keep in mind is that this is a draft. The final network may look a little bit different than that, but that also depends on the feedback that we get from you today. So we're really hoping to think about this from your own perspectives when you're in the breakout group. It's okay to focus on the area around where you are most familiar. If you are based in Lowell, or you work in Tewksbury or anything like that, it's okay to focus on those areas. That's what we really want to hear about. We as staff have been going out and ground truthing some of these areas, but it's a big region and we can't get to all of the spaces. So we're really looking for your feedback today.
Thanks, Kelly. So there's going to be two links available to folks. One is to this Miro board online Post-it board. Essentially, in your breakout groups, your facilitator will pull this up and add any Post-it notes to capture your comments. You're welcome as well to pull this up on your own screen or computer in order to look around and make any comments. For context, each group has one regional bicycle map and all of the 9 municipal pedestrian maps. Over to the right-hand side are some of those maps that I showed for your reference. So that's one link. Your facilitator is going to have that up on screen. Second link is to this web map, which will allow you to zoom in even further to explore some of the connections. When you open this up, you'll be able to see the draft proposed bicycle connections and walking connections, as well as those blobs for the continuous walking areas. If you click this little layers button, you'll be able to turn on other layers. So if you remember, I talked about the regional environmental justice layer. You can turn that on for comparison. Same with high injury network, I think, and kind of explore that. So if you're craving a little further zoom in and a little more detail, that's a resource for you. And with that,
Right, so I have 3 breakout groups with a facilitator in each. And in the 3rd breakout group, Apple's going to facilitate and Emmanuel's going to be there to help take notes. And so this kind of breaks you up into about an equal number. You're going to be in breakout groups for about 25 minutes. So I'll give a 5-minute warning at 7:50, just to let you all know that we're starting to wrap things up. But please let me know if you need additional time and we can extend it a little bit. So you're going to see a pop-up come up on your screen asking you to join a breakout group. Please hit yes, and then we can get started discussing the network. I'm going to open the rooms. Welcome back.
and we're back.
All right, just waiting for the other 2.
Yeah, you caught us at a good natural break. So.
Okay.
Our
Sometimes I feel like a
conversation.
waitress at a family restaurant and I just can't stop at a table without catching someone mid-bite. So I was also a really bad waitress. So. Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, I think this is everyone. So Katrina, I'll turn it back over to you.
Right. Well, yeah, I had a great group. We talked a bit about different bike facility types in general, kind of talking about how bike trails have like a more recreational feel, and then they don't generally go to all the destinations. So, we talked about bike lanes. We talked about the idea of wider shoulders that might be more appropriate in certain locations. We also talked about, what our group was referring to as neighborways. They have different names in different parts of the country. Some parts of the country call them bicycle boulevards, but just the idea of formalizing some non-big road connections through smaller neighborhood streets as an alternative parallel route to trying to force a bicycle lane onto a larger street. So that was some discussion about different bicycle facility types. We talked about a few key connections in Lowell that we're going to look more into. We got some thumbs up for the connections between Lowell, Billerica, Tewksbury, Chelmsford, so some of those connections on the edges of Lowell. And then for sidewalks, we talked, pedestrian network. We mostly talked about 1A in Billerica and the need to provide a continuous sidewalk network along there. And any comments I neglected to say aloud right now are definitely captured in my notes.
That's Route 3A through Burlington. Not 1A. that's
1A.
a big road.
That's what's outside my house. So that's why I got that mixed up.
Yeah, that's a different regional planning agency.
Yep, sorry.
No,
Thank you, Brooke.
Perry, do you want to report out on your group?
Yeah, sure. So we spent good chunk talking about the bike network. And actually it was brought up about the concern on the Nashua Road bike lane potential because of its narrow right of way that it could result in removal of trees. And concern about that wetlands that are in that area, and making sure that anything that is done on that roadway is done thoughtfully. So that was something that we hadn't thought of, so that was appreciative, and made a note on that. Also spoke about some other connections that we hadn't thought about, in Tewksbury as well, kind of the bike lane that is in Lowell that kind of ends right at Tewksbury, so potentially extending a bike lane there. And then we also spoke about some sidewalk connections, some ones that it sounds like people were in favor of, and some locations that could also be extended. So we had a really good conversation, and appreciated kind of that local knowledge that was added to this.
Thank you. And Apple, how about your group?
Yeah, my group primarily focused on the municipal pedestrian networks and finding spots that, you know, maybe the network doesn't need to end hard stop at town lines, but kind of ways to, you know, capitalize on existing projects or current infrastructure and kind of guiding one town into another. We also talked about extending or creating some new pedestrian facilities around high schools, especially some of the technical high schools that are maybe kind of left out of this conversation. And then we also chatted a bit about, you know, why people walk or don't walk in the region, and kind of looking at the value that an extended network that considers different right-of-ways, different accesses through roads and street typologies kind of would bring to the region. And anything else that I missed is definitely written down.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing here is just a lot about the sort of latent potential in a network, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with this plan. So I'm really excited to hear the summary of the feedback that you all received in your groups. Before we go into the wrap up or next steps, I do want to just take a moment if there are any questions. Have a little Q&A if anyone has any questions about the project or plan that we can respond to right now.
I guess since I missed the first half, will the summary or notes or video be sent out?
Yeah, so I have been recording this, so we'll post this on YouTube. I'll send out a, I know there were a number of people who registered who couldn't come tonight, and so we'll send this out to everybody who registered and everybody on our distribution list. And we're also going to be accepting comments on the network for the next 2 weeks. So we'll make sure we send out a link to that network map, so people who have additional feedback or want to submit some comments, we'll accept additional comments that way. So yeah, good question. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And I guess what's the next step or next meeting?
Oh, there we go. And Katrina, do you have any of this on slides or?
Yeah, I'll just pull up the slideshow
Okay.
real quick.
Great.
Can you see my screen, Kelly?
Yes. Yes.
Fabulous. So the presentation included the same schedule graphic. We're here in November in the mid to late stages here of this planning process. So we're going to take on board the feedback we've heard from you all, make some tweaks to the network, and then get into some of those next steps that I alluded to in the presentation. So finalizing the network both based on today and then the community walking audits. The NMCOG staff has been going out into some of these top priority locations to take a look at the conditions and help reflect on what that means for improvement. So then we're going to get into what we're calling here typologies, but this gets into, we discussed a little bit in my group, which is what type of bike lane makes sense, what type of pathway might make sense, and then we're going to try to assign those to the different roads and maybe make some tweaks along the way. And then from that point, once we have a network, once we have the type, we'll go on to prioritization to start thinking about, okay, what do we really need to do first? What do we really need to do to improve the conditions now? And that can spur future change. So those are all of the different components that will be included in a final sort of plan, action plan that come out of this process. And so with that, I will unshare my screen once again. Anything to add, Kelly, about next steps?
Yeah, I think the one other thing to add is that we're also looking at policy recommendations. So the plan and the network is one aspect of this, but then policy and education are other key components. And that includes talking with all of our municipal staff, working with our municipal engineers. We're vetting the network with them as well to understand, are there capital projects that we might not be aware of that we should incorporate into this? Are there any known issues that we're not aware of that we should be aware of that might prevent a link in the network from being completed? And then also really trying to understand like what sort of policies do we need to advance at the local level and across the region in order to help implement this plan. So that I think is the other aspect to moving forward that we're working on. So with that, I will be following up with everyone who has registered with we have a pretty lengthy distribution group. So we'll share a link to this video, and we'll also provide a link to how you can provide additional comments. If you're like me, you need to sit with something for a little bit before you can actually like provide a really thought out set of comments. So I welcome the introverts among you to take your time with this and get back to us. And we will keep everyone here in the loop. When we come back, we're going to have a final public meeting where we'll be sharing the full plan. And that will be sometime in the winter, probably January, February, as we get close to wrapping up this plan. So we'll make sure that you're involved in every step of the way. And I just really want to thank you again for taking your time and joining us tonight. I know you have a lot of options on where to be on a Monday night at 7 o'clock. So I'm glad you decided to hang out with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right,
too.
thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.